first step to doing this is to not differentiate between what's yours and what's your ancestors. The reason is that if you have come into a family line, it's now yours. You've inherited it, period, the end. And that was not something which was, it's not like a death sentence. You actually chose that before coming into this time-space reality. You were looking at all those patterns. You decided to come in as the continuation of those patterns. I'm telling you, if you're listening to this program right now, you were the one that was watching those patterns going, you know what, I think I'm going to take that one on. I'm going to change that one. And it's not just these detrimental things which you're coming into, it's also beneficial things. You knew you had an intention, obviously, for coming into this particular life. And so much of that intention is interwoven with those incredibly special qualities that come through your specific family line. So a lot about stepping into ancestral healing is not just about recognizing these detrimental patterns and changing those patterns. It's a lot about recognizing those ancestral gifts you don't even really need to work on and allowing yourself to very powerfully embody those aspects.
Could you share a little bit more about how we do this work? Because often I feel like this is something I don't know about. Like, I don't know what my grandmother was carrying inside and emotional issues she was carrying. I just know, the outside story and how I remember her. But I know she had some anxiety. Like, I'm taking some examples from my life.
Okay.
She had some anxiety. I feel some anxiety. Like, I've been thinking like that. But I really don't know, like, what she was struggling with. So how would I go about this work?
Okay, so here's the first thing that I want everybody to understand about ancestral trauma is that you are essentially doing ancestral healing, whether you know it or not.
Huh.
Why am I saying this? Because when you come into a family, even if you're adopted, this is the case, when you come into a family and you've got patterns that are active within you, they are going to play out in your day-to-day life. And so you don't have to necessarily know anything about any of your ancestors. You're going to be working with those patterns in your day-to-day life. You're going to have that issue in the relationship. Now, if you are, let's say you never learn anything about them, and there's some kind of pattern of shame going on within the family line, and you start to powerfully work on your own shame, you are doing ancestral healing work.
Mm.
So it's not like, you're sort of cast down here on planet Earth. You've inherited every memory from everybody who's ever come before you, which is actually true. It's inside you. And yet you don't have it consciously. And so you're just going to sort of stumble around here. And unless you know that information, you're totally screwed. That's not how it works. Why I'm saying this is that there's so much anxiety in people when they're like, I don't know how to access this information. Maybe I'm not spiritual enough to be able to go get that information esoterically. Maybe I lost the birth certificate or whatever it is, right? You don't have to panic, okay? So when it comes to the knowledge aspect of ancestral trauma work, it's just the more you know, the better it gets. And you can have those very powerful moments where you're like, oh, wow, this goes far beyond just me. So knowing that the better it gets, the better it gets, the first step to doing ancestral trauma healing work is research. It's a lot of research. And it's the more the better. So I know that everybody's working with whatever they're working with. For some of us, it's going to be a lot easier than others. For some of us, it's like, go talk to grandma, right? For others, it's like, you know what? I don't know anybody, but I know roughly based on whatever genetic test I just did, I know roughly what area of the globe that I come from, and I know roughly my last name. Now, you can go and search databases for that specific name and history around that specific area. And what will start to happen when you start to pull at these strings is you'll get these very powerful hits. And I'm going to tell you, it will absolutely shock you how much information is just sort of sitting out there like this. It's almost like an Easter egg hunt that's just like waiting for us to walk down the trail, So it's about pulling those strings. And I'm telling you, you pull one string, that leads to the next string. So if you become really like engaged in this, the research element is something that doesn't really stop because you just keep getting more, you just keep getting more. And this sort of string sends you in that direction and you get these nuggets and whatever you get, you can work with it. So like, let's say that you don't even have like all the information on your specific family, but you know that they lived during a certain wartime period at that time. Research what life was like. Figure out, wow, do I see any of the patterns when I'm reading about these people and what they may have experienced? Do I see any of these patterns within me, right? Okay, so once you've got the research element of it, that makes it easier because it's easier to become conscious of these patterns that you have inherited, both positive and negative, right? You might be like, wait a minute, I come from this whole culture which is really, really adept when it comes to music. look at that. I see the musical capacity within myself. So let's say that you notice those positive things, right? The positive things you notice, it's about really owning those things and then allowing them to express through you, through your embodiment. So we call this embodying them. So you want to embody your aptitude and gifts that are handed down through these ancestral lines. To the opposite, if you see some of these patterns, it's about consciously being the one to change those patterns. And it's not like you have to do some incredible esoteric process for that. It's as simple as it is with working with any other pattern. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you've got a family who is, you're noticing that down through the centuries, they've all been super, super poor. And so all of them have this mentality around abundance where it's like, you guys got to save up for the worst. Okay, then you're doing what you would do if you were just somebody who didn't have any of that information. You're just noticing that you have this negative relationship with abundance. You are working on the abundance patterns. You're changing the way you're thinking. You're exposing yourself to different thoughts, different perspectives. You're doing, maybe guided meditations on that type of a thing. The esoteric element of ancestral healing is really, I don't want people to get lost on the idea that they have to do it this way. I mean, is, say, taking shamanic medicine with the intention of ancestral healing work a profoundly powerful esoteric experience? Hell yeah, it is. It's awesome for people. Are there guided meditations that you can do where you're connecting with ancestors? Yes, and they're profoundly powerful. But I could literally take Joe Schmo off the street who has no idea about any of these esoteric processes and be like, let's do some ancestral healing. And all they'd have to start doing is to recognize patterns, So I've already mentioned the sort of changing these detrimental patterns. Another thing that you want to be doing is listening to the music that belonged to your ancestors and eating the foods that they would have eaten. And again, you don't need to have a lot of information to be able to walk down the road of history, because there are historians that are dedicated to this in every part of the globe. It's not hard now to find that information and to start practicing some of these things. And it will shock you how much of it awakes, in the body, where you're like, oh, wow, it's weird. It's like I'm eating that for the first time, but I swear it's like my whole body remembers this. So it's almost like you're just trying to wake up your genetic, material, because right now so much of it is dormant and there's only a tip of the iceberg that is active and that we are consciously working with.
I think it's very powerful to go into this work because I often feel like people are judging themselves. Like, it's my issue, it's my problem, it's my fault that I'm like, and the picture is just so much grander, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I love that it does is it takes this feeling of victimization that most of us have, and it makes it so you can't even really trace it. It's like, oh, and they're that way because of this, and they're that way because of this, and it's almost like you're seeing this cause and effect train, and it becomes a lot less personal. It does. So, you had mentioned this friend and the experience that your friend had, and that's a profound element that I noticed in the experience that you were describing, is that in the becoming aware that this is something that has moved through the lines and didn't start with him, it's no longer as personalized. Therefore, there's not as much personal meaning added to it, meaning like I'm just the messed up one. Meaning like, I guess I can never have this need met. It's profound to see the dysfunction of your own family, to look at the whole line of them and be like, oh my God, we have this issue. Hi guys, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you address that we actually chose this, because I interview a lot of people who have pre-birth memories, and they talk about that we choose our parents, but we also choose the lineage that we're going into very consciously.
Oh yeah. We chose to become literally the furthest most extension of that consciousness. So we literally take it on. And I don't think that most people who are in the spiritual field are yet quite aware of this. I mean, most of us are just kind of thinking of ourselves as souls that come into a meat suit. We're not, seeing ourselves looking down at this train. Let's imagine the consciousness of the family line as like a train that's been continuing throughout history. We're not realizing that one of the things we take on in the same way we take on this specific body is we take on that entire storyline. And we're saying, look, I'm going to be the continuation of this. And it's once you start to become aware of this, my God, the magic you start to see in the world, because, let's say that I meet somebody like you, right? Now, let's say that I have this awareness that in your family line, you come from this line of women who all have very questioning minds. But let's say that for centuries, they've been taught to shut that all down and just do what's expected of you within society. And, you're the game changer for the family. And it's like, when I'm watching you be the game changer for the family, I'm watching everyone in that family line watch you like, like they're still alive through you. So
Mm.
you're creating this healing for all of them that have existed before.
Oh, wow.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.
Ina, letho, resto maliata falia, tanshavra leto.